And so I said, listen, lady, I'll take my chances. And she's like, no, you can't get in. I even tried to sneak in. No, don't try to sneak around an airport. Trying to sneak around an airport, bad idea.
Meet Palle Bo, a digital nomad from Denmark on an epic journey around the world.
My name is Palle Bo, and I'm a long-time radio producer. In 2013, I started planning to become a digital nomad and a full-time traveler. 3 years later, I had sold my house, my car, and all my furniture. And in July 2016, I set out on a quest to visit every country in the world. In this podcast, I'm taking you along on my journey. And I'm sharing my ups and downs and let you listen in to conversations with some interesting people I meet along the way.
This is the Radio Vagabond Podcast.
When I started planning my journey in 2013, I started listening to a lot of podcasts and reading a lot of books. And one of the podcasts that I found and binge listened to for a very long time was a podcast called Extra Pack of Peanuts. And that's your podcast.
That is my podcast, and thank you. So you're the one person listening. You're responsible for all those downloads. I appreciate it.
This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. Whenever you need a hotel anywhere in the world, go to Hotels25.com. That would get you the best price. Hotels25.com searches a bunch of the biggest hotel sites in one simple search. Hotels25.com. It's best price guaranteed.
So my name's Travis Sherry. We are here in Austin, Texas, together in person, which is great. And I grew up in Philadelphia. I run a site called extrapackofpeanuts.com that has a podcast as well, so you can hop on over, find that out. And I also do another podcast with a fellow traveler who some of you may know, Jason from Zero to Travel. We do a podcast called Location Indie, and that's all about the location independent journey, the ups, the downs, and everything.
How did you get into travel, and how did you become interested in the traveling community?
So when I was younger, it's not that I didn't like travel, I just didn't do it. I was probably a normal person, right? Oh yeah, I would travel, but I didn't have that burning desire to get out and travel like I do now. There were a few turning points in my life. One was when I was 18. I took a road trip for the first time, and if you're from the U.S., I went down from Philadelphia down to Florida. Not the sexiest thing that'll ever happen, but to me, it was the first time I had real freedom. I wasn't traveling with my parents. I was out on my own. I had a buddy, and we just road tripped through the East Coast, and it was the first time that I had that sense of freedom and traveling alone, and it just was cool. It spurred this idea that, wow, I can just get out and go and see things. I don't even have to have a plan. I'm just driving, and when the world's small, or the U.S.'s smallest church is off an exit, I pull off and I go see it, right?
Oh,
yeah, it's just like, you don't know what you're going to get into. I then went and about 6 years later, I lived in Switzerland for 5 months, and I did an internship there. And that was the first time I lived abroad. And so that was a unique experience, because all of a sudden I wasn't just traveling through, but I was really digging into a culture. I was going to the same grocery store and talking to the checkout lady. Like, I had a life there in Switzerland.
Which part of French or?
I was down in Lausanne, so it was French speaking. I did not speak French, but I made do. And so
you didn't choose the cheapest place in Europe.
Yeah. So here's the interesting part. I went from Lausanne, Switzerland, to then over close to Tokyo, Japan. So that experience spurred me on to do more, and then I lived abroad in Japan, and I taught English in Japan for 2 years. And that is where I started Extra Pack of Peanuts when I was living there, and that's really where, before I wanted to travel, but this is when I really started traveling. I lived in Japan for 2 years, so I traveled all around Japan. Of course, then all of Asia was pretty close. I'd never been to Asia. So then we were flying down to Thailand, and we were going over to Cambodia, and so we went down to Australia. So this whole part of the world that I never had access to was now alive to me because I was living in Japan. And then that was 2010, and 8 years after that, we're still going. So those are kind of the few tipping points that helped me really get this wanderlust stoked in me that has yet to be quelled, of course.
Yeah. And when did it become the thing about getting an extra pack of peanuts on the planes?
Yeah, so the really quick story of the name is I was a kid and I hated flying. I still don't enjoy flying. Some people are airline geeks. Some people love the process of flying. I don't. To me, it's a means to an end. Of course, I have to fly to some places, right? When I was a kid, I'd get on a plane. I'd get so nervous that I sometimes would be the one using the puke bags. That's why they have them on the plane. It was lucky when I got it in the puke bag and not on the person next to me, right? So I was 8, 10. I was flying down to Florida to see my grandparents. But what happened, the only thing I liked about flying was I'd ask the flight attendant for an extra pack of peanuts, because that's when they used to give peanuts out to everyone, right?
Oh, you actually did that.
I'd ask. I'd be like, can I have a second pack of peanuts? And she'd be like, oh, sure. And she'd give it to me. And so my 8-year-old brain, I was thinking, I'm gaming the system. I've got 2 packs of peanuts. No one else does. They all have one. Little did I know she probably would have given me 100 packs of peanuts. But I in my head, I was like, I'm getting something for free. I'm winning this little game. And it was the only thing that I enjoyed about flying. Well, fast forward 20 years, all of a sudden we're learning about frequent flyer miles and travel hacking and stuff like that. Now I'm on a plane, that's going to cost, or a ticket's going to cost someone $1,000, and I'm flying there for $50. So now I'm really gaming the system. Yeah. And so that was kind of the extended metaphor for the blog, was that, all right, before I thought I was gaming the system, now I'm really getting flights for 5% what someone else is paying out of pocket.
Yeah. So did it start with the blog, or was it podcast from the start as well?
Started as the blog, January 2012. Podcast came in about May of 2013. So it was a blog first, and then a podcast, and now they both, we do both now at this point.
And you've done more episodes than me?
I've done...
Of my travel podcast,
yeah, I've done 300
way more.
40 extra pack of peanuts one, and probably 100 location indie ones. So we're getting close to 500 total. Yeah.
You're listening to the Radio Vagabond Podcast. Before we continue, I want to remind you that I have a Facebook page where I share a lot of thoughts, pictures, and videos. You'll find it by going to facebook.com/PalaRadioVagabond. And now, back to the show.
Tell me a little bit about the podcast. What's it about, and why should people listen?
Yeah, so Extra Pack of Peanuts podcast started off strictly as an interview show. And the reason I started the podcast was because back in 2013, the only travel podcasts I could find were based on destinations, which were fine. I like knowing what people tell you about the best pizza in Rome. But what I found was I was meeting all these travelers, and I was hearing about all these travelers, and I was reading all these blogs, and I was thinking, okay, destination is one thing, but what about the people doing it? Let's hear their stories. And I couldn't find any travel podcast that was highlighting people's stories that were in the travel world and living these really extraordinary lives. And so it started as an interview show. It's now progressed. We do about half interviews with people like I just mentioned. Anyone I find interesting. Sometimes readers suggest them. Sometimes I meet them. Sometimes I read about them in a magazine and I ask them to come on. Anyone I find interesting, we do an interview show. That's about half our episodes. And the other half are my wife and I coming on and doing shows on a variety of topics. Sometimes they're super fun and our 10 favorite beaches, or what are our top destinations in 2019. Sometimes they're informative. Okay, we have a 10-month-old kid, so we're like, all right, what's our infant packing list? What are the items that now we know after 10 months of traveling with them that someone who has an infant needs? Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Extra Pack of Peanuts Travel Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about our favorite places in the world, both places we've been to and places we're dying to go. This was a super fun episode to record, and I had an awesome time coming up with my list, as did my special guest.
Did that start out as I don't have any guests for the show, and hey, what about you?
100%. That's the first show she came on was probably episode 80-ish.
I think I heard that episode. I really honestly think I heard that one. It was so good.
Hello, travel nerds, and welcome to the Extra Pack of Peanuts Travel Podcast, the show that teaches you how to travel more while spending less. I'm Trav, the creator of Extra Pack of Peanuts, and with me today is a very special guest, someone who has figured out a way to fit an entire world's worth of fashion into a carry-on, and also the person who helps me dig through bags of trash when I lose my wallet in Paris. My wife and constant travel companion, Heather. Heath, thanks so much for coming on the show today and sharing a microphone with me.
No problem.
All right, guys. Today we're going to be doing a special show because we're currently sitting in our great apartment in Split, Croatia in the middle I had no guests lined up. I had nothing ready to go out, and I looked at her and I said, would you want to come on the show and we can just do our favorite places in the world, like that we've been to? And you make a list and I make a list and we won't talk about it beforehand and we'll just do a show. And she's just like, well, I'm kind of tired. And, and it's like I convinced her to do it.
So, Heath, what is your number 5 place of the place that you've actually been?
Well, surprisingly, because this missed your list, my top 5 was actually Australia. And it was a lot like America, but it is a place that I had dreamed of going since I was a child. So to me, living out that dream has to be on my top 5 of places I've been.
Yeah, and during Australia, we went to Melbourne, Sydney, and Cairns. All were really awesome. Highly recommend Australia. It was a lot of fun. My 5th place is a place that we just went to.
I thought, okay, that was cool. That went well. That was fun, but maybe it was a one-off until it was published. And everyone was, oh my gosh, we love Heather. That was so much fun. You guys have such good rapport. Can you bring her on again? So, of course, when I didn't have a show again and I wanted her to come on, I showed her some of the nice compliments. So, I worked her in that way. And she was like, sure, I'll come on again. And it just grew from there. We liked it. It was fun. It's obviously fairly easy to record because we're both in the same place. So that's a nice dynamic. We're looking at each other face to face versus interviews. A lot of times are over Skype. They're not always in person. And people loved it. And so that's why half the shows are with her and half are interviews.
And I can take anything you can throw at me, and nothing can get me down. Life is looking so bright, the sun is up again. I'm feeling like I could fly. No clouds in my way, no. And I'm living the good life. And I'm living the good life now. I'm living the good life. And nothing can get me down, no.
Apart from Extra Pack of Peanuts, Travis also does a podcast with his good friend Jason Moore.
Yeah, so that's called Location Indie, so a totally separate podcast. And what I'll say, the differences about that is, that's more focused on what life is like to build a location independent business. Of course, travel is a huge part of that because for us, the reason we've worked hard to build location independent businesses is for the end goal of travel. So a lot of travel comes out in that, but it's really us telling the nuts and bolts of our story of how we started these location independent businesses. It's a 30-minute show, so the Extra Pack of Peanuts show, there's no time limit. Sometimes we go an hour and a half, sometimes it's 45 minutes. Location Indie is 30 minutes, usually on some specific theme or topic.
You actually start a clock.
We start a clock. We are not always done by the time the clock ends, so we might go 2 or 3 minutes over, but it's a weekly show for anyone who is interested in saying, I want a life of travel. I don't want it to be just a vacation, but how could I actually lead this life that both of us are leading, where we can travel when we want, where we want, because our work is able to be done from anywhere. And so we found out a lot of people who love traveling, that's a big goal for them. That's a dream for them because they want to travel more, and it's hard to do if you have a regular job.
Yeah. And I mentioned it briefly, Jason Moore lives in Norway now, so you're in different continents when you do that show?
Yes, we are. So when we get together in person, which is not often enough, as it always is with fellow travelers, you don't get to see him enough. But when we're together, we try to get some shows done. But typically, he'll be recording after his baby girl goes to bed. So it'll be like 9 p.m. for me.
Yeah.
It'll be or 9 p.m. for him. It'll be like 2 p.m. for me. We'll try to rock some shows. Occasionally, I'll bite the bullet and get up way early in the morning while his kid's at daycare. So yeah, he's usually 6 or 7 hours ahead. So it's crazy how much time zones throw a wrench into a lot of things, but you make it work. If that's your biggest struggle, you're leading a pretty good life.
Yeah, well, being a location indie myself, sometimes I have a studio session with actors in the studio in Copenhagen, then they can only do it at 10 o'clock, so I had to get up here in the US at like 3 o'clock in order to be ready for 4. So
yeah, and when it happens, I just look at it, I think, again, if this is the biggest issue in my day, life is pretty good right now.
And you also have a company. You really started a company, so Jason's your partner.
Yeah, so we do the Location Indie podcast, and then there's a community around that. So what happened was we ran a project called theparadisepack.com, and it was resources. It was online courses and ebooks about how to start location-independent businesses. Everything from how to run Facebook ads, to how to start a blog, to the mindset behind it, to prioritizing your time. So anything we thought that people would need if they're like, yeah, I want to start my own business and I want to be location independent, what are the resources I need? So we ran that project, and what we found out was that people love resources and they love learning, but they also need a supportive community, because a lot of times friends and family don't understand this goofy, crazy lifestyle that they might be trying to lead. And so they kept asking us, well, where can I find other people who are as crazy as me? And we thought, well, we're two people who are as crazy as you. Why don't we put together a community? And that's what we did. We put together this community called Location Indie, where people can come meet other people. We do in-person events. We also do every month 3 or 4 virtual events, so people Skype in and Zoom in from all over the world. And it's all based on helping people grow and monetize their businesses so that they can continue to travel and lead location-independent lifestyle. So we do that together. And the fourth project, because we might as well get them all out here on the table, we have an app, and
that's a new thing.
Brand new. As my wife says, she's like, why are you starting something new? But to me, this was an idea that I've had for 4 years, and I'm very proud of it because it finally came to fruition. And it's an app that from U.S. and Canadian airports, you download the app. It's called Jetto, Jetto. It's on the App Store. It's on the Google Play Store. It's free to try out. Then we have a free plan and a premium plan that's like a couple bucks a month. And what you do is you pick your airports. And from there, we call it the app for spontaneous travelers. Because you're not saying, oh, I want to go Philly to Copenhagen on these dates. What you're doing is, oh, I want to leave out of Philly. When a good deal comes out, think 40 or 50% off a regular price or more. So let's say Philly to Copenhagen's $320. It'll send you a notification. It'll say, hey, in May of 2019, Philly to Copenhagen's $390. And I'd look at it and say, yeah, I'll do that. And so you book it. So usually these deals disappear within 3-4 hours, sometimes a couple days. So it's these crazy good deals that you have to act on fast.
Yeah.
And so it'll send you a notification right away when a deal hits, and then you can decide, yeah, I want to do this. And we've had people go to destinations they never would have gone to otherwise because they're like, yeah, let's do it.
That's so cool. I got to try that because what I've been doing is mostly, I think, okay, I want to leave at around that time, but I'm flexible and I don't really know where I'm going next. So sometimes I go on Skyscanner, search from here to anywhere. But this is even cooler.
You are essentially the perfect customer for Jetto. It's people who have some flexibility. And again, even if you don't have a ton of flexibility, there's no harm in downloading the app. And even if you have a 2-week span, maybe something hits in that time period. If it doesn't, no big deal. But essentially for you, you've got flexibility. You want to see a bunch of different places around the world. So when a good deal comes up, you think, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah. Let's go.
This episode was brought to you by Jetto.
That's right. Let's Jetto. Yeah.
You told me that you collected travel stories from other travelers. What is your own personal favorite travel story of something crazy happening?
Yeah, so I'll give you, I guess this is my biggest travel mishap. And
yeah, I like that.
Right, and that's what I like to ask people on our podcast. What's your biggest mishap? Because people, I think, get the impression that the more you travel, the better you get at it. I find that the more I travel, the more lenient I get with stuff because I'm used to it. I'm not sitting there obsessing over every detail, which leads to some funny instances. Case in point, we were traveling from Singapore down to Bali, down to Indonesia. And so we had only 20 hours in Singapore. So we got to see friends. We go around. We go to the airport. And I go to check in. And the lady says, I'm sorry, sir, you can't get on this flight. And I'm thinking, okay, why? Is my name spelled wrong? Whatever. She's like, your passport is full. I'm like, okay, what do you mean? She's like, well, when you get to Indonesia, you need a full page in your passport for an Indonesian visa. It's one of those visa upon arrival situations. And I'm like, well, no, I have some pages in here. And you know, because when they stamp, they're all haphazard. So there's one page with one stamp on it. I'm thinking, just cover that up. Who cares? But in the back, I had like 2 full pages. I'm like, listen, I have pages. She goes, oh, those aren't for visas. That says an amendments page. I'm like, well, what does that even mean, right? So she's like, I'm sorry, Singapore Airlines cannot let you get on the flight because if you got to Indonesia and they didn't let you in, we are responsible. And if we're responsible, they fine us, tens of thousands of dollars. And so I said, listen, lady, I'll take my chances. And she said, no, you can't get in. I even tried to sneak in. No, don't try to sneak around an airport. Trying to sneak around an airport, bad idea because you look suspicious. So they wouldn't let me on the plane because my passport was full. I had to run to the Singapore consulate. I had to beg. There's a lot of stories in here, but I had to beg at Singapore Airlines headquarters. I was literally basically on my knees begging this CEO type guy to get me on the next day's flight because everything was full. He eventually told me that it was a $150 fee, which he put into his pocket, which I was fine with. Gave me a piece of paper that was printed out on a dot matrix printer. Like he was taking those little pieces off, and he goes, it had a bunch of numbers and letters on it. He goes, take this to the gate, and they'll let you on the airline. I'm like, well, what is this? He wouldn't explain. He's like, just take it to the gate. I went. They had no idea what it was, of course. So I said, call up the headquarters. They did. I gave him the name because I had written down his name. He's some bigwig. And eventually they let me on the plane a day later. But yeah, I had a full passport. And of course, when I got to Indonesia, no one cared. They put the visa on the page. It said amendments. And so all was good. But yeah, too full of a passport led me to spending 48 hours in Singapore. You think I would learn my lesson, but I took my parents to Thailand and Cambodia, and my mom's passport, not too full, but to go to Cambodia you need 2 months of validity or something. Yeah. And she didn't, so we found ourselves at the Bangkok U.S. Embassy getting her a new passport basically 1 year after I had a passport snafu in Southeast Asia as well. So even though these things happen, I don't usually learn my lesson. I just roll with it.
It's so cool to finally meet you, and when I met you, I felt like I knew you already. So thank you so much.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for the downloads. When you listen to 350 episodes, you do know me, even without ever meeting me, and that's the beauty of podcasts. Yeah. Thank you so much.
This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. Whenever you need a hotel anywhere in the world, go to Hotels25.com. That would get you the best price. Hotels25.com searches a bunch of the biggest hotel sites in one simple search. Hotels25.com, it's best price guaranteed. The next guest in my interview series that will hit you on Friday will be a French travel blogger, Rubens Fils. He does a blog called Being Around the Globe about traveling solo as a black person. And in 2 weeks, I'll speak to Alexa Meisler from the Break Into Travel Writing podcast. And remember that you'll get a regular travel podcast on Monday, so stay subscribed. My name is Palabo. See ya.